So, with that, I'm going to bring up the colleague of a previous speaker, actually co author, Joshua Stamper. So, welcome, Josh.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. We had a great time with Charlie last time, and she made some recommendations. I actually think I reached out to you before I got recommendations from Charlie. I was like, we're getting Josh.
And it's so funny because I think we are cross like Naomi and I have reached out to hundreds of people to speak literally on Thrive. And so some of us have doubled up, but that's okay. But we are so grateful to have you. And I'm I am going to do a proper introduction and then I have a great question to start out with because I did a little deep dive into your work and I it's based off of one of your podcast titles. So I
Oh, okay.
have a question that we're gonna jump right into. Um, but my what I wanted to tell you is that Josh Stamper is a speaker, author, and founder of Aspire Media and the Language of Behavior. Josh is an educator, he's an author, and he is a speaker, and he equips leaders with trauma-informed strategies to help you transform your schools. So we are so appreciative of everything that you do, and I am grateful that you are here because I think this is the perfect timing to have you um, start because people are now coming into the buildings. We've had, well, here in Oklahoma, we've had kids in buildings for this is going on our third week. I think we've got some in their fourth weeks. Naomi said it's to Tuesday. Some of them started in up on the Northeast coast, and so everybody's a little bit different. But I that leads me back to one of your podcasts, and is so why do we see student behaviors spike after that first few weeks of school, like, have gotten going? And you're
Yeah.
on there you go, you're on
I
mute.
have a French bulldog over here and she won't
Oh,
stay still. So if you see me mute, it's
it's
because of
okay.
her. So
Alright.
all that being said is yeah, I agree. I think once we get past the first couple of weeks of school, as we know, we jettison into academics pretty hard. And what we don't realize is just the amount of stress, especially in secondary, where you have potentially, 7, 8, 9 different teachers that you're going to, different directions to, and they all have different expectations. And obviously, there's a rigor there that wasn't seen before. So we really do spend as teachers, which you should, is, really trying to build a community and get to know your students and build a relationship. But what we don't realize is just the additional stress that we're putting on our students about the third week, fourth week, that honeymoon period we start to see. But then also
Over.
there's yeah, it's over. And then you also see that comfort level too of the students as they're building that relationship. They're starting to get used to their surroundings. They're starting to make friends and other peers. They sometimes want to show out and make a name for themselves, or get the acceptance of those from around them. So sometimes you might also see that.
That is interesting, and I use my own 13-year-old as an example
Yeah.
who came in, and I think that setting the stage is so important, and I was reminded of this because she's in 8th grade, and so, top of the school, but still all the new teachers, the new schedule, you're not with all your friends, and there's new people, I mean, exactly what you hit on, right? But I asked her, I was like, "So, on your first day, what was the difference between all of your classes? Like, not how was your day, like, what was the difference?" And she's like, "Well, so and so actually took the time to get to know us. Like, it wasn't about them and their credentials and their whatever." And not only did that was one day, but that was day 2 and day 3. And I love what you're saying because it sets you up for a relationship building, which is what I'm hearing you say is very important to the foundation.
Gosh, yeah, for sure. I mean, if we don't have connection, we can't have correction. So, I mean, those things that we're talking about as far as like, get to know you the first couple weeks, that's great. But, what I always ask is that all teachers are doing that every single day, finding opportunities to connect with your students. And sometimes we feel like, oh, I've got a great connection with them, and maybe I have something in common, or maybe I know a little bit about themselves. But unfortunately, what occurs is that we feel like compliance is a healthy relationship when in fact we need to dive deeper about what's going on in the world, family dynamics,
Mhm.
interests. There's a whole host of things that we need to understand about our children, our students, that sometimes when we look at the behavior, there's something underneath that that's really trying to be communicated with our kids. And, as an administrator, especially, I did it for almost a decade. When I go and talk to teachers about things that we found out either through the counselor or myself, the teachers were shocked, usually, about what was going on, in the background in their home life. And, for us, we just wanted to make sure that, every kid had a safe adult in the building outside of, someone in the front office. And then also that our teachers were equipped to make sure that they were asking questions or doing check-ins and finding out what resources our kids need, because we just assume that every kid's there ready to learn. And a lot of times that's very low on their list of priorities. Some of them is just survival.
I worked in a urban school district for 7 years, leading the communications there, and we had, out of 46,000 students, 94% were free and reduced. That's a high number of kids who come
Really
to you
high.
that have that, just, I mean, massive amounts of problems before they ever walk through the door. And so those needs are huge in addressing those. And so I want to get to understanding and responding to student behaviors. You have three tenets for that. Can you walk us through those and share how educators can use those tomorrow in their classroom?
Yeah, there's so many things. I wish I had more time to talk through the
I
tennis, but
know, I know.
I'm just going to give it like a real brief, and then we can kind of dive into some of the strategies that people can use regardless of their position. But Charlie probably did a great job of the first tenet, which is consider your environment. So that's really like us asking, okay, can you just consider the space that you're in, right? So if you're a teacher, counselor, administrator, whatever your title is, your space and how it's constructed for your students. And we talk through a lot of things as far as like, you know, every senses for our kids and potential triggers and things that might be occurring. Troy always says that 1 in 5 kids are neurodivergent. And so that statistic's only going up. And so we really need to think through our environment for that growing population. And if we're doing that, we're actually hitting on a lot of other needs that are our students that aren't recognized as that. It still helps them. So really looking at your environment and setting that up. We also talk about like power dynamics and things like that, safety, like some things we don't even think about it, like with the furniture construction of like some kids walk into a classroom and the first thing that they look is how can I get to the exit as quickly as possible, things like that. For a parent, if you're an administrator, if you have a large desk that you're sitting behind, what are you communicating? Things like that. So just consider your environment as the first tenet, because that is something that we have 100% control over,
Mm,
within our classroom.
yeah.
The other thing is exploring the breakdown. So looking at just kind of the nonverbals that our students are doing. So for instance, if a student is heightened, they're dysregulated, they're outside the classroom, let's say they're stiff as a board, their eyes are glossy, their fists are balled up, they're not communicating when you're asking them a question, so they're nonverbal. Like, what is all of that telling you, right? So we go through all of the fight, flight, freeze components of that, what the behaviors and the categories they may fall in, but then also talking about those triggers that may exist. It might be smell, it might be something that was
Mm,
traumatic in an environment
yeah.
that they recognize. It could be color, it could be music, it could be a whole host of things that we don't even consider or think about. So just looking at the breakdown of the behavior and what might be underneath that. And the last thing is responding intentionally. So obviously our kids are not perfect. They're going to make mistakes. So when they do so, what does that look like? And so we talk about like 4 parts within that tenet of, working with the student one-on-one, as far as the student taking ownership, talking through who's affected, teaching the appropriate behaviors because we can't assume that they possess those skills because they didn't use those skills in that opportunity, and then making sure that there's a consequence that is related to the behavior. So that's really kind of responding in a very
Mm,
real way with a teach piece versus what we typically do, which is detentions, ISS, OSS.
yeah. Um, that's very interesting too. I think back to behaviors that I may have had when I was young, like maybe a teenager and got in trouble. And I will never forget one punishment that I had that fit the crime or whatever, fit my, it was a behavior. And my dad made me step out the backyard and pick weeds, and I couldn't listen to headphones and music, and I was like, "Oh, this is terrible." but I never repeated the behavior again. I don't know if that's the right course, but I'm saying like responding and accordingly, like I, I know we've seen people that have spanked in public or whatever,
Sure.
like that doesn't generally correct behavior, right? Like it just
No.
adds to the frustration and things like that. That was for me was a course correction that wouldn't work either. I would say, and I'm like old school because I'm very old. I am an older adult who had a generation of parents that originally thought that that was okay. But when my
Oh,
dad
for sure.
fixed that and changed to a behavior driven, it's like, ooh, that was not, I didn't like that. So, and now it's kind of funny. I love yard work, but but I just think that that is like that intentionality of
Mhm.
the way you respond is so important to the student that it fits. And this is also interesting because we're going to talk about in school suspension later with one of our other
Yeah.
but the art of in school suspension. But I want to know why those traditional methods like in school suspension and OSS often fail to create the lasting behavior and change that you're talking about. I mean, like, how
Yeah.
does that language of behavior offer a different approach?
Sure. So Kathleen, I'll go back to you talking about your parents, right? So look, I have 6 kids. And so, yeah, I know it's insane in my house. We won't talk about that. But just
And a
as a
dog.
snippet, and 2 dogs, but yeah, a wife, 2 dogs, 6 kids, and a partridge in a pear tree is the Stamper household. It's never a dull day. So my house sometimes, especially my boys, I have 3 boys that are very similar age. It looks like WWE in my living room. Like it's crazy. So the intention is that they're being playful, but someone's going to take an elbow or forearm somewhere
Yeah,
that isn't,
right.
desired. And of course, the behavior is going to escalate, right? So as a parent, if I was to take my children in that situation and send them all to their rooms and say, you're going to spend the entire day in there, 8 hours, I will give you lunch. You better fix your behavior and be better tomorrow. Everyone that hears that story would be like, you're a terrible parent. Like, you are for real going to put your kid in a room for 8 hours?
Yeah.
However, school does this every day,
Oh
every
my God.
day in
Yeah.
ISS, and nobody bats an eye about it. But they just assume. And let's pretend we're taking the same scenario, right? I send my kid into the room for 8 hours. I, as a parent, then am assuming that they're going to reflect on their behavior. They're going to build new skills. They're going to take ownership. Then they're going to repair the relationship that was broken and then be a better version tomorrow without any intervention from myself as a parent, just because they went to their room. Well, that's what we do again in ISS. None of those skills are going to be built. There's animosity when they go back to the classroom. We already know what ISS looks like, and the fact the behavior doesn't go away. In fact, if you look at data across the country, the infractions increase from the student based on the consequence that they receive. So my question is, why are we doing the same thing as we usually do? Can we do something differently? And so I'm going to throw out a quote from Dr. Dan Siegel, which is, too often we forget that discipline really means to teach, not to punish.
That's so good.
A disciple is a student,
Yeah,
not a
right?
recipient of behavioral consequences.
Ah, discipline is to teach. That's a profound statement. And interestingly enough, I don't know where you are in the country, but here in Oklahoma, I know in Texas, and there's probably some other states recently that have moved to the no cell phone bell to bell, no
Yep.
cell. Uh, and the amount of policies that were written for that include infractions for cell phones includes in school suspension for it. I was like, wow. Because I'm usually the one helping them communicate when things go south, right? So
For
it,
sure.
it's very interesting to see that and then to hear what you're talking about here with discipline. So how do we change that? How do we move the needle? How do we get to a better form of um, something that works for them? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's a strategy or mindset shift that helps um, people move that needle?
Yeah. So we talk about this in the book, and I'll throw this. This is for low level infractions, and then I'll go for higher infractions in just a
Okay.
second. But for the low level infractions, so for instance, if you look at a typical school as far as what is being referred, it's typically two things. It is disruption of the classroom or disruption of the educational environment, or two, it's disrespect. Those two things. And if you look at the minutes lost, and this, I did this on every campus. I was on 4 different campuses in 2 different districts in my time in the building. Every campus I was in, those were the 2 highest referrals, and thousands of minutes were lost in the educational environment. So they were not with the content expert, they were with the ISS clerk, and sometimes that varied depending on the day. And obviously, an ISS clerk cannot have, and Jonathan's going to talk about this later, cannot possess all of the credentials needed, right, especially in the secondary. That could be what, 20, 30 different classes that they're going to need to understand, right, and know, in addition to lesson plans and whatnot. So obviously that's a failed construct. So what we did was we asked our staff, like, what are some of the barriers? What are some things that you want? And of course, the 2 things were always, I want to build a relationship with my kid. I want to know what's going on, right? Because there's a breakdown sometimes in communication if someone else is handling it. And 2 is time. I don't have time, because if I'm dealing with it, I'm dealing with it with 25, 30 other kids in the classroom. And so now it's a spectacle. I don't need a show, and I don't need them in our business. And the time component of, like, actually getting maybe 3 to 5 minutes with the kid. So what we did was we found a model that is called the push-in model, and we adopted it. And so instead of removing the,
can you tell me that?
Push-in model.
Push in.
Okay. Yeah, push-in. Yep. So what it means is you're just pushing another adult into the classroom. So they call the front office and they say, hey, I want to push in. And what you're doing, instead of removing the child and sending them to ISS or the front office, what you're doing is you're getting another adult in to take over the class, right? So an admin, counselor, a coach, it could be anyone, right? Whoever's available. And we had a master schedule, and we literally had a push-in model schedule for our receptionists. But everyone that was able and willing to do the push-in model was not only trained, but they also had a radio on hand. So if they heard it and they were nearby, they could just get in there really, really quick. So this person takes over the classroom, teacher and the student get to go outside 3 to 5 minutes, maybe take a walk, get a drink of water. And that gives the teacher the opportunity to, again, share or show that they want to build a relationship with the kid, that they care, they're not sending them away, creating a fracture in the relationship. But 2, they're also getting to the bottom of what's going on, right? So then they can figure out if the kid needs resources, they need to go somewhere, they need food, they need a whole host of things, right? And then they also then provide the expectations of what is needed to go back into the educational environment. And most times, having that little 3 to 5 minute conversation solves all of the issues as far as the low level behavior, gets to the bottom of what's going on, and then the kid gets to go back into the classroom with the teacher, with a great relationship with the 2 people. So all that being said is, in our typical model, they're going away. There's a fractional relationship. They don't get the information from the content expert. What is the correlation? Well, grades are going down. And then you want to talk about state testing is going down due to that. Parents are upset because they're not in class for a low level infraction. Everyone's frustrated by the system. Teacher wishes they had a relationship with the kid, but the person that's actually dealing with the kid is the administrator. So the administrator is having a great relationship. And then if the teacher's lucky, she gets communication of what's going on with the kid in the background and the consequences that were received from the administrator.
Wow. That's mind-blowing. That is a very big shift in addressing issues. And so what have you seen? Like, how have you seen this change the classrooms?
Oh, it's beautiful. Here's the thing is, you can implement it tomorrow. Everyone that's watching right now, you can implement it tomorrow.
That's what I was thinking.
and you're like, oh, I'm not an administrator, I don't have the power to do so. Well, you have a team. You have a team of teachers. I've seen this firsthand where, someone reads the book or whatever, and they build it out themselves. So they just have a team of teachers that say, okay, if you need a push in, call me and I'll come over and I'll take over your class for a couple of minutes. It's not that big of a deal, right? So I think it's something that's beneficial in the sense that all of those things happen and it doesn't take a lot. Because here's the thing is, we're looking at financial situation for the country in education. It's horrible, right? We don't have the manpower to do it, right? Well, this doesn't cost anything additional. It doesn't require additional manpower. It's just getting people to buy into a system to come in once in a while. And do you need to push in every single day? No. You don't. It's just the rare occasion, right? And it's trying
especially if you're building relationships.
Correct.
Then that's going to go down even further. And that's the whole point, is what I'm hearing you say.
And then the campus culture is improving also because everyone feels like they have the opportunity to solve the issue when they didn't feel like that. They didn't have the power to do that prior to.
Wow. I can see how that could help in so many different situations that I've heard of. And they wouldn't elevate to the news media, which is where I'm generally
Yeah, right. There's so many
not
low
all of
level
them,
things that
but
ramp up to high
yeah,
level things. Yeah.
I know. And then that's where I'm on TV and have spent way too many years.
We don't want TV. We don't need news.
We don't need news coverage for that. Trust me.
No.
No, because that's bad. Wow. It seems so simple. Why is it so hard though? Why do we still go back to the old school mentality? I mean, I know so many teachers that are still in that um old school. Where's the resistance? Why aren't we changing?
Well, I think I mean, we're human beings, right? And we're in a business of relationships, and we're in the business of human emotions, which is messy. I mean, just look at any family, right? I mean, it's hard. It's hard to have that construct in place for such a long period of time. And I think teachers do a great job, especially at the beginning of the school year. But as we go on, right, and things are
Mhm.
stressful, and we're seeing the same behaviors maybe over and over, or maybe the same frustrations. Sometimes it's hard not to take it personal, and when you're taking it personal, that's when you have that break, right? And you want them to be removed. You want them to go away. And it's hard. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes emotions. And so you even compound that with maybe something that's going on. I can think of so many instances of teachers going through divorces or custody battles, or someone lost a job, or they're struggling financially. And you take all these stressors, and then you you send them into a room with potentially 150, crazy hormone teenagers every single day. It's hard to have that robotic piece where
Yeah.
you are essentially a window, not a mirror.
Oh, yeah. So good. It's so true. We had actually a question in there is like, what happens to the kids that run? Like, who goes after that kid when you have
Yeah. So in that instance, you have someone that's nearby that has a radio. So if that was, if and sometimes those conversations do go sideways. I mean, once again, if you have an escalated child that you're trying to have a one-on-one conversation and they aren't in the right mindset to have that, they may need 30 minutes to decompress and get to that point where they actually are listening and able to respond in a rational way. And so that's when you do need assistance. So um, this isn't foolproof in the sense that every time that
Sure.
you do this, it's going to be 100% beautiful and work out perfectly. But we saw thousands of minutes taken away from the ISS room and back into the instructional environment.
That's so huge. I love that.
But you can't
I
do this work
love
alone, right? So
Yeah,
there's
no,
that question.
you need
Yeah,
help. You
you
need a
need help.
partner in that.
Yep.
Yeah. I see that. Uh, my mind has been blown. I love this. I wish more of my daughter's teachers were having access to this over the years.
Sure.
So, with that said, the ones that have attended and signed up today and are registered or have access to your free gift, could you tell us a little bit about what that gift is and where people can? Naomi's going to drop the link in there for everyone.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's the relationship inventory. Yeah, so that was in the book, but we're going to give it for free here, which is a construct that we put together, which is essentially data proven instructional things that occur at the beginning of the classroom, right? So we talk about like consider your environment. So this is just a checklist for folks, and it's not a gotcha, right? I had this as administrator. I go into classrooms and I just look through and just give it as a form of feedback. So just presenting it to the teachers to say like, hey, you did an awesome job. You did 15 of the 20 things here on this checklist, which is going to create engagement for your kids. So like just one example is standing by the door and greeting your kids. And a lot of people are like, oh, I do that. I bet you do, right? But do you do it with fidelity, right? Do you do it every single class period? Do you do it every single day? And the times that we don't, we actually see a decreased engagement. When you do it, you actually see a 40% increase in engagement in the lesson plan just by standing by the door and greeting your kids by name, right? It's so powerful, and we don't even think about it, right? Because we want to go to our email, we want to go and make copies, we maybe are talking to a team teacher about something, which are maybe important, but it's just a reminder, and people had it on their desk, on the wall, just as a reminder of like things to get done every single day that we knew for a fact that were going to benefit our kids.
40% increase in that's mind blowing. That's enough big enough statistic to have everybody here standing at their door tomorrow
And it's
greeting
so
you,
simple.
right? It is.
Yeah.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's the
I
power
can't
of
even
your name. instead
Yeah.
of knowing your name.
Knowing your
Yeah.
name.
It goes back to that, the power of belonging. Way back
Totally.
at the first person tonight, our
Yep.
first speaker, is that, do I belong here?
Yeah.
And how we have had a tie all the way through from our first speaker to now, like how everything is just winding beautifully together. It's just like we created some piece of music to use Jeanette as
Jeanette, yes.
yeah. Or Fakey because of the art that we're creating, right?
Mhm.
Like this is just today's been a beautiful day of learning and growth. And we appreciate you coming in and sharing today. I hope everyone here took something away. I know I did. And so thank you so much for
Oh my gosh.
joining us.
Yeah, it was my honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. We really appreciate it, Josh. Thank you so much.